Hello, history fans. Welcome to Module 4, Document Discussion. We have 4 documents to discuss today: Jane Addams, the People's Party Platform, Alice Stone Blackwell, and Sedition Act. So let's hop to it. These are our progressive era documents that we've been reading and discussing. Let's start with Jane Addams. So we said that the progressive era reforms really start slow at the local level, and then they go to the state level, and then national, and then maybe even international level. So it seems appropriate to start at the local level. We talked about Jane Addams and Hull House in our lecture video. So this is just going to be kind of a continuation of that discussion too. She says that in the first couple of paragraphs, she starts to try to make the case for why places like Hull House are necessary, why they need to exist. Third line down, she says, well, democracy has made little attempt to assert itself in social affairs. We have refused to move beyond the position of 18th century leaders who believed that political equality alone would secure all good to all men. What do you get out of that quote? What does she mean by that? I think here she's talking about how government only goes so far. Up to this point in history, government only goes so far. Political equality does not mean real equality, she says. Just because you can vote doesn't mean that you're equal. Just because you have all these constitutional rights that we've been talking about for a long time doesn't mean that your life is good. Social affairs and living conditions are an important part of the story that isn't being discussed in the Gilded Age and Progressive era. And then the second paragraph, she's really talking about some of the problems that are facing people living in the tenements. She says, third line in the second paragraph, many of the people living there are very poor, the majority of them without leisure or energy for anything but the gain of subsistence. What's that word? Subsistence, like you're surviving and that's it. You have a roof over your head and you have food in your belly and that's it. No extras whatsoever. You are barely surviving. They have no share in the traditions and social energy which make for progress. Towards the bottom, the very last couple lines of that paragraph, she says, but the paradox is here. When cultivated people stay away from a certain portion of the population, when all advantages are withheld for years, the result itself is pointed at as a reason and used as an argument for the continued withholding. What does she mean by this? The two classes, wealthy and poor, have become so socially separate. They're not hanging out with each other. They're not learning from each other. They don't care about each other. Intelligence and cultivation, she calls it, isn't in circulation. Intelligence isn't in circulation. People who are wealthy, who have the money and power and prestige and social influence to be able to change things for the better, don't know that that's a problem in the first place because nobody talks to each other. They don't have poor friends. And the reason that they don't have poor friends is, because they're not cultivated like I am. They don't enjoy the same things that I do. But the reason that they don't enjoy the same things that you do is because you don't hang out with them. It's like this circular system. So, all right. So in the first page here of this reading, she's talking about all of the reasons why places like Hull House need to exist. They need to create basic welfare or basic well-being for immigrants and poor people living in the cities, so that they can get beyond mere subsistence, mere survival, and actually thrive, become cultivated, become assimilated, as we discussed in our lecture video. Let's also flip to the back page, though. Here's something that we haven't really talked about yet. On the second page, second paragraph down, she says, I have seen young girls suffer and grow lowered in vitality in the first years after they leave school. In our attempt then to give a girl pleasure and freedom from fear, or freedom from care, we succeed for the most part in making her miserable. She finds life so different from what she expected it to be. What do you get out of this? What does this make you think of? We talked in our lecture about how in the early days of the progressive era, we see a small but important increase in the number of white, relatively wealthy middle class, native born American women who are going to college, or going to high school, going to college. They have skills, they have thoughts, they have ideas, they have goals and dreams for their future, and they don't have anywhere to use them. They don't, they have all this knowledge and all these skills, but they're not allowed to go outside of the home and get a job. They have all of these goals and dreams for themselves, but no way to make those dreams a reality. People like Jane Addams, right? All of these relatively young, wealthy, middle class, native born white women need something to do, need something productive to do. Whole House gives them that, right? Because we talked about how Whole House has all of these programs like kindergartens and libraries and concert halls and citizenship courses, right? Someone has to run all those programs. Someone has to make Whole House operate. Who's going to do that? Those young, wealthy, native-born white American women who have gone to high school and in some cases college and have knowledge and skills and need a place to use them. So if you went to school for literature, you really enjoyed literature, you work in the library. If you went to school and studied languages, you teach the English as a foreign language class, English as a second language class, whatever. If you studied music, you perform in the concert hall. If you studied nursing, you work at the healthcare clinic. We get it, right? Someone has to make all of those programs run. Whole House is kind of a twofer. Places like Whole House help two very different groups of people. They're helping immigrants. That's why they exist, giving them basic welfare and well-being and helping them assimilate. But they also help those wealthy, native-born white women who have become educated, found jobs outside the home. Yes. So hooray for Jane Addams. So let's go up to like the regional and sort of national level now with our second document, the Omaha platform or the People's Party platform. Lots of names for this one. The Populist Party, the People's Party, populist people. Get it? Get it? Mm-hmm. They're a political organization. We said political party at the local, state, federal level. They made up in Omaha, Nebraska, good farming state, to create their platform. So what does that mean? When a political party has a platform, this is like a statement of where they stand on the issues and what they're going to do in the next election cycle. And so this is their platform. This is kind of a long one. So let's run through it really fast here. On the first page, the preamble, towards the bottom, 4, the fourth paragraph down, they get around to talking about like why a third party like the People's Party needs to exist. What is the problem with the existing parties? Why can't they do their job? The Democrats and Republicans. On the fourth paragraph, they say, we charge the controlling influences dominating both these parties have permitted the existing dreadful conditions to develop without serious effort to prevent or restrain them. Neither do they now promise us any substantial reform. They have agreed together to ignore in the coming campaign every issue but one. They're not paying attention. The People's Party, the populists, are saying the problem with the Democrats and Republicans, both of them, is that they're not paying attention. They're not paying attention to the real main problem that's been plaguing the country for quite a while now, wealth inequality and all of the problems that go along with it, which we've talked about a lot. So we're not going to talk about it anymore because I'm tired. So the People's Party said that the two existing parties aren't doing their job. They're not listening. They're not paying attention to the real issues facing the majority of actual everyday average Americans. And so somebody's got to step up and do it. And they're going to be the ones to do that. On the second page, second to last paragraph of the preamble, this is an important part. They say, quote, we believe that the power of government, in other words, of the people, should be expanded as rapidly and as far as the good sense of an intelligent people shall justify. to the end that oppression, injustice, and poverty shall eventually cease in the land. That's what they want. That's why they're called the People's Party. They want power to the people. If you remember nothing else about the populists, remember that. They want power to the people. That's their whole thing. We believe in the power of government, in other words, of the people. People run government. That's how it's supposed to work. We have a democracy. We have a republic. People are supposed to be running the government. The government doesn't boss the people. That's backwards. So the Populist Party are going to try to make that happen in a lot of different ways. We've mentioned, I think, in our lecture video, that their number one thing that they want is coinage of silver. In the finance section, finance on the third page, finance section number 1. There it is. They say it. We demand free and unlimited coinage of silver. That's it. That's what they want. They want the silver. They also have a lot of other things. So we've talked a lot about the silver issue on our lecture video, and how that doesn't actually pan out for them. But they have a lot of other things that they want too. So in finance number 3, they say we want a graduated income tax. What's that about? We have that now. The graduated income tax is the idea that taxation shouldn't be the same rate for everyone. Taxation should instead be based on your level of income. So people like the Rockefellers and the Carnegies of the world who have a whole lot of money, Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, those people, lots and lots of money, they're taxed at a higher rate than the yous and me's of the world who just have a little bit of money, because poor people need to keep money in their pockets to pay their rent and to buy their groceries. So if you make just a little bit of money, it makes more sense for you to pay just a little bit of taxes so that you can provide for your family. Whereas the people who make a whole lot of money are taxed at a higher rate and pay more taxes. They should be the ones who bear the burden of taxation because they can afford it. The goal behind the graduated income tax is trying to make taxation, and by extension government, more equitable, more equal for all the people. Remember, the populists are all about power to the people. How can we make government more responsive to the people, more equitable, more fair for more people? Then on the very back page, let's look at that. The very back page of the Populist Party platform, that's hard to say. They have a whole lot of other things that they want. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're not going to talk about all of these. Don't panic, but we're going to talk about several. Number 1, they want a secret ballot system. What is that? We have that now. At the time, they didn't have that. At the time, when you go into, you know how like nowadays when you go into a voting booth, they give you a ballot and it looks the same for everybody, no matter what's actually on it. They're all the same size and the same shape. That's new. Beforehand, when you went into the voting booth, voting office to vote, they asked you what your party was and you told them, and each party had its own ballot. And so, if you pick up the long skinny green one versus the short fat blue one, whatever they were, then everybody knew instantly what your party affiliation was. It wasn't secret. And it also wasn't illegal at the time for your boss, your employer, or perhaps your landlord to lean over your shoulder and watch how you marked that ballot. And if they didn't like the way that you voted, maybe you didn't have a job or a place to live the next day. It seems like voting wasn't free, wasn't open, wasn't democratic. So the Populist Party wants a secret ballot system. We have this now. What else? Oh, they talk about the graduated income tax again on number 2. Where's the other one? Number 7. All the way down to number 7. We want the reform press, the consideration of the people in the reform press, the legislative system known as initiative and referendum. That's it. What do they want? They want initiative and referendum. We have this, some states have this now and some don't. Oklahoma does have it, which is why we have 300 state questions every election cycle that we all have to keep straight. Initiative is the idea that citizens can initiate laws. So you yourself could write a law about something, and if you get enough signatures on your petition that says, yeah, that's a good law, we should vote for it, then it will go to referendum, and the entire people of the state will vote on it, on whether or not to accept that law. So you don't have to be a politician to participate in government. Anybody can participate in government. Anybody can write a law initiative, and if it seems like a good law to a certain number of people, then it will be put forth for a referendum, which is when the people of a state vote on it. Power to the people. The next one, number 8. They want to provide for the election of senators of the United States by a direct vote of the people. We have that now, not at the time. At the time, senators, every state has 2 senators, right? Everyone's equal, and every state is equal in the Senate. At the time, those 2 senators were appointed by the state's governor. And so when they went to Washington, D.C., they weren't really representing the interests of the state. They were representing the interests of the governor. They weren't listening to the people. They weren't listening to their constituents. They were just listening to the governor, like his own personal yes men. So again, the populists are all about power to the people. They need to expand the power of government. They want direct election of senators, so that senators will ideally, hopefully, probably listen to their constituents. So all of these things, right? Ballot, secret ballot, initiative and referendum, direct election of senators, graduated income tax. The Populist Party wants all of these things to try to expand power of the people in government, make government more equitable, more responsive to the people. The populists don't get it done. But all of those ideas come back to haunt us, and they eventually do get passed, and they seem like good ideas. Thumbs up. Our next document, Alice Stone Blackwell, answering objections to women's suffrage. We talked in our lecture video about how one of the progressive amendments was equal suffrage. The equal suffrage amendment started way early 1840s and is only ratified and goes into effect in 1920. It takes forever, largely because of that separate sphere idea that we were talking about, that idea that it was women's job and role in society to stay at home and take care of cooking and cleaning and childcare, and they didn't need to bother themselves with politics. For a long time, for men, and certainly men, but also a lot of women really feel like it's a privilege to not have to bother themselves with politics. Paying attention to politics is hard, you know. Engaging in the public sphere in any way is hard. You gotta have an education. You gotta go get up in the morning and go to work. And you gotta then work at your job. If you're doing something like voting, you gotta pay attention and read the newspapers and get registered to vote and go down to the polling place and mark the ballot. And oh my gosh, you know, so hard, so difficult. If you're doing it right, things like education and working and voting and being civically engaged can be hard work. And so it was seen as a privilege that women didn't have to do any of that hard work, that somebody would just take care of them. But of course, with the early progressive era comes more education for women, and women are buying that argument less and less. So Alice Stone Blackwell here, she, in her little intro, she says that she's a feminist activist and writer. Let's take a little small sidebar here. In this period, 1910s decade, the early feminist movement is just about the right to vote. We can't say women's rights yet, plural, because they're not paying attention to women's rights, plural. They just want one right, the right to vote. That's it. That's all they care about. They acknowledge that there are other problems like education and pay and harassment and what have you. But they really feel like the only way that they can possibly solve any of those other problems is if they have the right to vote. They need a voice in their government. They need to be at the table. They need to be represented. And it's only with that sort of representation and voice that they can have any hope of solving any of those other problems. So early feminism, first wave feminism, 1910s, they're really just about the right to vote, and they'll deal with all of those other things later. Second wave feminism, we'll get there later in the semester, but not today. So Alice Stone Blackwell, the intro on this document calls her a feminist, and we need to understand that what that phrase means in this era. Okay. Basically, what this document is she's taking common, frequent objections to why women shouldn't be able to vote and then just obliterates them. So again, we're not going to talk about all of these, but some of the funnier ones. The second one, towards the bottom of the first page, the question of chivalry. Allowing women the right to vote will destroy chivalry. What does she say about that? Two things. First, she says justice would be worth more to women than chivalry if we can't have both. Okay, really, if you're not going to let me have both, I'll take my representation. Thanks very much. Justice is worth more than any other things. But she goes on to say, you know what? They're not mutually exclusive. She says justice and chivalry are not in the least incompatible. Just because men should be nice people and open a door doesn't mean that women can't have the right to vote. It's kind of apples and oranges. Just because women have the right to vote doesn't keep men from being nice. It's courtesy. It's common courtesy. That's all. Second page. Women are too emotional and sentimental to be trusted with the ballot. Okay, what does she say about that? She says, yeah, you're right, and that's not a bad thing. In the third paragraph, she says, men are largely controlled by sentiment also. She gets really sarcastic. Was it logic that swept like a wave over this country and sent our army to protect the Cubans? Is it shrewd business sense that sent thousands of dollars out of this country to feed starving people? Was it hard common sense that sent American soldiers into a death trap in China in the baseless hope of rescuing a few hundred American citizens? No, it was sentiment. It was emotion. Emotion is a good thing. Things like honor and integrity and wanting to be ethical. those are sentiments. Those are emotions. She says, the man who is not controlled by sentiment betrays his friends, sells his vote, is a traitor to his country. Government needs sentiment. Government needs emotion. In order for it to have any hope of working, we need to be patriotic and love our country. And those are emotions. So it's fine. At the end there, government would be a poor affair without sentiment. It is not likely to be damaged by a slightly increased supply. It'll be fine. My personal favorite, probably the last one we'll talk about here. The objection is that it will turn women into men. Allowing women to go into the voting booth will turn them into men. What does she say about that one? She says, that's not how this works. That's not how this works, you guys. The differences between men and women are natural, biological. They are not the result of disenfranchisement. Just because you allow women to enter a voting booth doesn't mean she's going to suddenly start growing a penis. That's not how this works. Ridiculous. Okay, so that's enough about Alice Stone. The last thing that we talked about, the last topic for the progressive era is the World War II. The First World War. First World War, one of the fears that a lot of native-born Americans, including President Wilson, really have during the First World War is that immigrants, first generation immigrants or second generation people from citizens from immigrant families will, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, be more loyal to their homelands than they are to the United States. Historically speaking, World War I is not the only time this happens. Historically speaking, when America goes to war, there seems to be an effort by the federal government to squash all possibility of dissent. They want to build consensus. They want everybody to get 100% behind the war effort. The Sedition Act of World War I is part of that story. So basically, this is, just one really long paragraph, basically, that says all of the things you can't do. What kinds of things can you not do under the Sedition Act? It makes it illegal to obstruct the military, second line down, interfere with the operation or success of the military or the naval forces. So, okay, no mutinies, that seems fair. You can't obstruct the sale of bonds or securities in the United States. What's that? Nobody buys bonds anymore. It's not a good interest rate. Back in ye old days, bonds were a way for individual citizens to finance the federal government instead of the other way around. People bought bonds as generally as an investment because it was loaning the American government your money. You bought like a $10 bond or $100 bond, whatever they were. They come in different amounts. Then and now they come in different amounts, and they all have an interest rate. And so since it's the federal government backing up that bond, it seems like a pretty safe investment. The interest rates used to be pretty good. So it was a way during wartime, First and Second World Wars especially, for individual citizens to loan their money to the government for the war effort and to finance the war effort. So Sedition Act here is saying you can't obstruct the sale of bonds. You can't try to keep the US government from getting money. That would hurt the military, for sure. A few lines down from that, can't incite or attempt to incite insubordination, disloyalty, mutiny, or refusal of duty. I can't talk. So you can't incite disloyalty, whatever that means, right? That's open to interpretation. There's probably a lot of things that might count for that. But you can't say anything bad about the military. A few lines down from that, towards right at the middle of the page. You can't utter, say, print, write, or publish any disloyal, profane, or abusive language about the government, or about the military, or about the Navy, or about the flag of the United States. You can't say anything bad about the government, the military, or the flag. Okay. You can't fly other flags. Display the flag of any foreign enemy. A few lines down from that. You can't curtail the production of any products necessary or essential to the prosecution of war. So no saboteurs, for sure, but also no strikes happening in factories, because if workers are on strike, maybe they're striking for better wages or better conditions or what have you. If workers are on strike and they're not working, then that means that things aren't being made for the war effort. The factory isn't churning out bullets or parachutes that day. That's hurting the military. That's making it harder for them to win the war. So you can't do that. So there's all these things, right? All of these things. You can't obstruct the military or the sale of bonds. You can't say anything bad about the government or the military or the flag. You can't hurt or harm production in factories in any way, shape, or form. That's a lot of things that you can't do. I hope we see that there is a problem with all of these things. What is the issue here? You can't say anything bad about the military. All of these things in one way or another fly right in the face of First Amendment rights. Freedom of speech is pretty well gone for a lot of topics. And what's the punishment at the very end of this front page, second line from the bottom? A fine of up to $10,000 or imprisonment for up to 20 years. That's a pretty hefty punishment for doing this. On the back, in the second paragraph, it says something else about the mail. What's the deal with the mail? The Postmaster General may halt the mail of anything in violation of the Sedition Act. How's he going to know if something that you sent through the mail violates the Sedition Act? It's going to open it and read it. So the Postmaster General is given the authority to open any mail that he deems he needs to be investigated. What's the problem with that? That flies right in the face of constitutional rights too. You have a right to not only say things, but also write things, freedom of the press, freedom to publish things. There is a right to privacy found in the 9th and 14th Amendments. All of these things, front and back of this page, fly right in the face of people's constitutional rights. Freedom of speech, right to assembly and petition, right to freedom of the press, right to privacy. Remember I said that, this is not the only example of the federal government in times of war trying to silence dissent before it happens. Like, this is not the first time, and is certainly also not the last time, that Americans have been perfectly willing to give up constitutional rights during wartime. They think that desperate times call for desperate measures, and yeah, we're going to give up these rights now, but we'll get them back later. Sometimes that can be a slippery slope, right? There's no guarantee that when you give up a right, when individual citizens give up a right, that you'll get it back. Fortunately, it happens with Sedition Act, but for quite a while and for quite a few people, it's a hard road, and that doesn't happen. There is a lot of were a lot of people who were kicked out of the country because of violating the Sedition Act, or sent to jail, or fines, or all of the above. So the Sedition Act, during World War I, there's this attempt to silence dissent, to create consensus. By and large, it works, but it is a pretty major and pretty devastating, pretty obviously blatant attack on American citizens' constitutional civil rights. So with that, that's the end of our document discussion for today. I hope you guys found this illuminating, and have a good rest of your day. Don't work too hard.